Hi, I'm Ron.
And I'm Don.
And this is the Ron and Don Show. Thanks for joining us today. Today we're coming to you from our host location here in Newport Richey, Florida. We are in Bricks 33, which is a really outstanding restaurant if you find yourself in Newport Richey, Florida. And today's topic is fall and winter prep.
Now wait a minute here. We're in Florida. I'm talking to a Floridian, and we're going to talk about winter prep in Florida?
I can't think of a better locale than Florida to talk about how to deal with the winter.
Okay.
Here we go. First item on our list today is leaves. Think of a fall situation where you've got leaves blowing around a parking lot, leaves accumulating and blowing around on a rooftop, and all those leaves can lead to a lot of trouble. Think of roof drains and clogged roof drains and leaves blowing up into rooftop air conditioning units and all the dust and debris, as well as the leaves themselves.
So you need to get the PM done and what the roof drains.
Pay attention to all those leaves, I think is what I'm trying to say.
Okay. This is also the end of the Atlantic hurricane season. Kind of the more violent storms go up the East Coast primarily, and you got to be ready for that, knowing having all your checklists ready. You had ready for the Gulf season. This is the Atlantic, and of course we all remember what Sandy did to New York and New England.
Yes, indeed. Okay, well, I mean, we're talking about some East Coast and Northeast stuff. Why don't we talk about some West Coast challenges? Certainly the high winds and the wildfire threats that are created from those high winds can be a real issue too. So consideration should be taken for those regions of the country where the winds can really create some challenges.
We have colder temps and more severe storms. We'll have the end of the tornado season in the Midwest. You'll have rain, snow, sleet, hail, all kinds of things happening through the fall, and then getting into the middle of winter, extreme cold and snow weathers, snow up in the middle part of the country, latitude-wise.
Well, and I think of all that precipitation in whatever format it decides to finally land in, and the challenges that can be associated with having, for example, cracks in your parking lot. In the summertime, cracks in the parking lot and water sitting in those cracks is not a problem. Certainly in the wintertime, in those environments where you have the freeze-thaw characteristics, you can have a lot of problems. So if you've got cracks that need to be addressed, the time to address them is probably now.
You always talk about Chicago. They have two seasons: road repair season and pothole season. Potholes happen in the fall and the winter and the spring. They fix them in the summer. The other problem is with the shortening of days. You have to readjust all of your time clocks for your landscaping and building and signage, lighting. So be sure that you're staying on top of that. And there are expedited times where the day gets shorter at a faster rate, and there's times where it mellows out. So just make sure you stay on top of when sunset is on your equipment if it's not automated.
Speaking of landscaping needs to be trimmed in the fall. Winter is not a time to have the bare burden of dealing with dead branches and things like that. So trim your branches before it becomes winter, full-blown winter, and also go ahead and evacuate those irrigation systems in those climates where the freezing of irrigation can create a problem.
You also have to be concerned where it gets really cold on the mulching of your landscaping. Don't forget to check your parking lot drains and grates. Those drains and grates, the structure underneath them will deteriorate, and I've had several fail over the years as a result of the bricks or the concrete that held up the grates being bad. So look hard inside and make sure that the sand pile in the bottom of that drain is not too high. If it is, you're going to need to have it removed.
Other outside area concerns should include your outdoor sheds or other outbuildings, and whether or not the roof systems or the roofs are engineered to even support a heavy snow load that might occur in these areas.
Now, are you a flag carrier?
I am indeed.
Well, be sure you go out and flag all the landscape areas, so if you do snow plowing, they don't run into all the curbs and tear up your curbs and your landscaping. They're just little small flags. Sometimes they're very tall poles. Doesn't much matter as long as the snowplow people can see them and can avoid them. And if you have wheel stops and you are snow plowing, pick them up, get them out of there. First of all, more dark hours, they're more of a trip hazard at night to your guests, and they also have a tendency to end up chewing up the snowplows, and the snowplows sending off into landscape areas, even damaging buildings.
Indeed. Now, I talked on this topic a little bit earlier, and it has to do with roof drains. Certainly in the fall, it's a great time to keep an eye on all those leaves and where they're going, and making sure where they're not going is in the roof drains. Certainly as you get into the winter time, you've also got to reestablish and reassure that those roof drains are free and clear, because all that snow and all that snow melt has to go somewhere.
And again, that goes right back into in many cases, into those storm drains. Make sure that you have a path to those storm drains that's safe for all that drainage. The exterior building, you have to make sure that all the holes, cracks, and gaps are sealed up to keep unpaying guests as well as cold winds from entering.
Another challenge that seems to occur mostly in the winter is the failure of water heaters. Water heaters tend to fail because they work a little bit harder in the winter time with that cooler water inlet temperature and in fact the outside environment being cooler. So know that if you've got an older water heater, it may be a good time to look at replacing that water heater before it turns into the dead of winter.
Also make sure that the sprinkler room and the water heater room, the heaters are working and they're staying at least 45 degrees at all times, if not warmer, and that the fresh air intakes, especially if you have louvered doors for atmospheric type water heaters, haven't been covered over by some well-meaning employee to help keep the room warm. That'll starve the water heater of air and cause carbon monoxide poisoning, which, if you have a slightly negative building, will get into your building. You have potentially hazard to your guests and your staff. I've sent people to the hospital on that one.
Wow. Well, and as long as we're talking about doors, let's talk about the weather stripping around those doors, not just for the boiler room or mechanical room, but for all doors that are means of egress for the building. Make sure that weather stripping is in good condition and that you don't have a lot of air loss through there.
How about that sweep gasket for the little critters?
Oh, sweet. Yeah, that's weather stripping. That's just the bottom piece of weather stripping.
Exactly. Make sure that your managers are taking home a printed list of the employees and prime contractors. If they don't have that at home and they have a power failure, they're going to have a hard time getting a hold of things. Hopefully, the facilities manager's phone number and the regional manager's phone number are already on their speed dials, but having that information available so they can make contact with their staff and their support people and contractors from home, especially in ice storms where they can't get to the restaurant easily, is critical.
Speaking of being proactive, another thing to be proactive with is making sure that the restaurants that are expecting some inclement weather have a proper provision of ice melt and plastic blade snow shovels and things like that ahead of the storm, not after the snow has fallen.
And let's talk about ice melt for a second. Ice melt, you can look at it in a whole bunch of different chemicals that are used: potassium chloride, magnesium chloride, sodium chloride, and calcium chloride. Each one of them have a refreeze point that is specific to those chemicals. Rock salt will generally refreeze between 20 and 25 degrees Fahrenheit. That means if night, when the guest comes in, the sun is setting, and it's 30 degrees out there, and the parking lot's got some slush and snow on it, just some wet spots. While they're in having dinner and it gets down to 20 degrees, it's refrozen. Now you have black ice for them to walk out on. Rock salt, potassium chloride are really not very good ice melt chemicals. Magnesium sulfide or chloride is good, but not great. Calcium chloride goes down to, I think, 27 below for refreeze. So that's really the best for most parts of the country, either for pre-treating or to have mixed in with sand for your parking lot, and especially for just straight ice melt for your sidewalks.
Well, and as I think of ice melt, I think of all that precipitation, all that slush at the front doors of your restaurant, and the need and the importance of having some extra walk-off mats available so that they can be changed out a little more often as the conditions require.
Now, if you have snow and you effectively have to take care of the parking lot, you're probably going to need a snowplow contract, and there are two primary ways that they're set up. One is a fixed rate by week or by month, and no matter how much snow you get or how little snow you get, you pay that fixed amount. The other one is set up per push, and a push is when the snowplows come out and actually move the snow, and they may have to do it once or maybe many times per storm. You have to establish in both cases the amount of snow you want them to come out and move each time. So if you want 1.5 inches or 3 inches of snow is the level at which you want them to come out and do a push, and then the contracts are based upon that. If you have an extremely heavy snowy year and you're on a per push, you're going to pay a lot of money for your snow removal. If you're on a fixed rate, you'll pay less, but in either case you have to watch the contractor. One, if it's a fixed rate, the contractor may find ways to economize and maybe go a little bit longer between pushes, or not do the whole lot, or find an easier place to put the snow. The second one is if you're on a per push, you may find that they come in a little early when the snow is not very deep, or they'll come in at midnight to plow the snow rather than waiting until 7 or 8 in the morning when you have more snow coming overnight, and they would just be pushing that same snow off anyway, and you have paid for extra pushes overnight.
Well, and doing a little bit deeper dive too into the whole concept of snow plow. If that snow is in fact being plowed, where is it being plowed to? If you're pushing it over to a most appropriate end of your parking lot somewhere, please make sure that as that snow melts and refreezes and melts again, that it's doing so in an environment which is not directly across the center of your parking lot, which is creating hazardous areas for your guests and crews as they're coming and going. Beyond just the drainage characteristics of your piles of snow in your parking lot, you also need to worry about what you're doing as far as impeding the flow of vehicular traffic in and out of the parking lot, making sure that snow is not plowed in or plowed into piles in areas that may interfere with the visibility of drivers coming and going. And the last item is too, as far as piles of snow, is making sure that you are not damaging area. What is the damage? Help me out.
One other thing, Ron, in that is where you put the snow so it doesn't damage landscaping. Because bushy plants, you pile all that weight on top of them, and you'll actually break some of the shrubs. And there are other plants that don't like the chemicals that we've put for snow melt, and you can brown them and even kill some of those plants and or grass.
Well, wait, I've got a great idea. We'll just haul all that snow off-site.
Oh, you've got a big wallet now. In your snowplow contract, you also need to designate exactly how much the cost is for a front loader by hour and the dump truck, and they'll also add in the bringing that equipment to the site, and when it's done going back, so you're going to pay for more than the time that they're just there, and making sure that the snowplow contractor who's going to remove that snow off your site has a legal place to dispose of it. Can't dump it directly into a river or a stream or anything like that. So make sure that that's all cleared up in advance as part of your contract.
And by the way, be careful, because a lot of municipalities will not allow you to push your snow onto the right-of-way areas.
Well, as a result of going through a hard winter and fall and doing all the things that we need to do to get ready for it, and we have been successful, the whole 9 yards, isn't it time we did a little celebration?
Absolutely. You got a corkscrew?
Oh, no, I didn't bring that.
Thanks for joining us today. I'm Ron.
I'm Don.
Subscribe.
Please.